Good evening and welcome to the Planning Commission meeting of Monday, January 22nd, 2024. I will now call the meeting to order and I will ask everyone to rise and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance together. Thank you. Ready to begin? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you everyone. Anna, if we could do roll call, please.
Chair Arith.
Present.
Vice Chair Toller is absent. Commissioner Rojas.
Present.
Commissioner Zick.
Here.
Commissioner Andrade.
Here.
Commissioner Toller is absent. Commissioner Klepek is absent. Commissioner Vivar.
Present.
All right, thanks, Anna. I see no announcements or presentations this evening, which brings us to public comments. These are for matters not listed on the agenda. Public comments will be heard at this time on items that are not listed on the agenda but are within our jurisdiction. I'll now open the public comment, and if you'd like to speak, please come to the podium, or if you're participating via Zoom, use the raised hand option at the bottom of the screen. And if you're joining the meeting on your phone and would like to speak, please press *9. Would anyone in chambers like to speak? All right, seeing none. Anna, do we have anyone Zoom or telephone?
No, there's not, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you very much. I'll now close public comments, and that brings us to Planning Commissioner comments and suggestions, starting with Commissioner Vivar.
There we go. Got it. Yeah, just wanted to thank you all for being here today. I know it takes a lot of effort to come out here on a cold, rainy day like this. We'd rather be at home relaxing with our coffee and our dogs. But thank you all for being here, and hope that everybody's having a good year so far. And I know this is going to be a great year, and I'm sure one full of surprises. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Vivar. Commissioner Rojas.
I have no comments. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Zick.
I too was going to thank everyone for coming, but for those watching on Zoom, there's only 2 people in the audience. I was going to thank people for showing up, anticipating that we'd have a number of people for tonight's agenda. I was going to thank them for speaking out. I was going to encourage them to stay involved and to make the point that silence is not consensus. Looks like we might have a lot of silence tonight. That's all.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Zick. Commissioner Andrade.
Yeah, I'll go the same. Happy New Year. Great to connect with city staff this year and kick off another great and effective and collaborative year. And then just a very brief reminder, tomorrow at 6 to 8 p.m. at the Senior Center, we'll have an opportunity, the city will be presenting an update of the first community feedback session on what's going to take place, or just ideas, concepts. What do you want to see? What do you envision the future for Fairview Development Center? So I invite everybody to come, or I believe come in person. There will be another opportunity to do it online with Spanish, and then on the 29th it will be virtual. So great opportunities to connect either in person or virtually, and share your vision for our city. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Andrade. I'll go ahead and echo sentiments of my colleagues in saying Happy New Year. It's great to be back after a little bit of a break. Sorry that the rain's keeping some folks from showing up tonight, because as always, we enjoy having the public here. But if you're joining us on YouTube or on television, we appreciate you making the time to chime in, so thank you. With that, we'll go ahead and move along to the consent calendar. And I see that we have 2 consent calendar items tonight. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and will be acted upon in one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the Planning Commission staff or the public request specific items to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar for discussion. Items removed from the consent calendar will be discussed and voted upon immediately following Planning Commission action on the remainder of the consent calendar. which brings us to the approval of the consent calendar items. And Anna, if you'll please read the title.
Consent calendar item number 1, December 11th, 2023, unofficial meeting minutes.
All right, thank you. Colleagues, do you have any comments on the minutes? All right, seeing none, may I have a motion? Motion made by Commissioner Vivar. What's your motion?
Approve the consent calendar items.
Okay, thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Rojas. Would you like to speak to your motion, Commissioner?
No comments on it.
No, and I think the staff minutes for that last meeting were great. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you for taking the time to go through our meetings and capture the sentiments that are expressed in the meeting. So that's it.
All right, sounds great. Thank you. Any final comments, commissioners? All right, seeing none, Anna, if we can bring up the vote, please.
That motion carries 5-0.
All right, thank you very much. That brings us to the title.
Chair,
Yes,
I think Ms. Lee or
I guess we're moving through it pretty quickly, aren't we,
We
Director Lee?
are. I didn't want to interrupt you. We're on a roll. I'd just like to take a few moments before we move into the public hearings portion of our agenda to make some introductions. We have this evening with us Cecilia Gallardo Daly, who is the city's assistant city manager. So I'd just like to introduce her. We're very lucky to have her. And I don't know if you'd like to come up to the podium and just say a few words. We're very lucky to have Cecilia. She's an amazing leader, and she's well known in the development community. So we're lucky to have her.
All right, welcome, Cecilia.
Thank you, Chair, members of the Commission. I am so fortunate to be here in Costa Mesa and part of the city's leadership team. And I'll be stepping in to assist Scott in managing the department and helping to staff the Planning Commission in Jennifer's absence. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. It's very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
And I have one more for this evening. I'd also like to introduce you to Bill Rodriguez. Bill recently joined the Costa Mesa team as our new Planning and Sustainable Development Manager. He's worked as a professional planner for about 28 years and is experienced in land development and entitlement processes, ordinance writing, and environmental review. Most recently, Bill worked nearly 19 years for the city of Irvine, where he managed major development projects across the city and also supervised the current planning team there for the past 6 years. And before Irvine, Bill also spent time with the cities of Santa Monica and Glendora. He has his bachelor's degree in urban and regional planning from Cal Poly Pomona, as well as his AICP certification. So Bill will have a major role moving forward also in assisting the Planning Commission. So we just wanted to make introductions tonight since he's a new addition to the team, and we are so glad to have him. So Bill, if you'd like to say a few words, please do.
Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, Commissioners. Just to kick it off, I would really want to express my deep appreciation to Jennifer and Scott for this opportunity. Today happens to be my 4th day on the job. It's been short, but I've learned quite a bit already, and certainly have experienced that you have a really just dedicated and hardworking staff. And I'm really honored to be joining this team and look forward just to bringing some good projects and good policies before this Commission for Action, trying to make Costa Mesa the best that it can be. So I look forward to working with all of you, and again, thank you, and happy to be here. So Happy New Year to all.
Great, thank you so much. Welcome aboard. All right, thank you, Director Lee. Anna, if we could please read the title for public hearing item number 1.
Public hearing item number 1, local historic register for the Leroy Anderson House, 208 Magnolia Street. Please note we have not received public comments on this item. This is a call for any ex parte communications.
All right, thank you, Anna. Commissioner Vivar, any ex parte?
None.
Commissioner Rojas?
None.
Commissioner Zick? Commissioner Andrade?
None.
All right, I do. It was more just for additional fact-finding on this particular item. I put a call in with the executives at Newport Mesa Unified, given the specific focus of the person under consideration for this item, having ties to the school district. I also talked to a Parks Commissioner and one person who sits on the Historical Preservation Committee, in addition to talking to staff on this, but that's the extent of my ex parte. And I will now turn it over to Ms. Curley to present on the item. Ms. Curley.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Caitlin Curley, Assistant Planner, and this evening I am presenting an application to add the Leroy Anderson House to the city's local historic register and enter into a contract, a Mills Act contract between the applicant and the city. The property owner at 208 Magnolia Street has submitted an application for the placement of his residence, referred to as the Leroy Anderson House, on the city's local historic register and requests the approval of a Mills Act contract. The site is located near the intersection of Magnolia Street and Orange Avenue in Eastside Costa Mesa. The site is zoned single-family residential with a land use designation of low-density residential. The Mills Act is a local property tax incentive program administered by the state and the County of Orange. It is a preservation tool designed and administered by local government. As part of the Mills Act, local governments may enter into a contract with the property owner. And in exchange for tax relief, owners agree to restore or maintain historic properties in accordance with federal, state, and local standards. In order to be listed under the Mills Act, properties must be listed on a local, state, or national register of historic places, or be a contributor to a national historic district. The properties must also be privately owned and subject to property tax. The city can stipulate in a contract what maintenance or rehabilitation needs to be completed on the property. These contracts are for a minimum of 10 years and extend 1 year annually unless either party chooses not to renew the contract. The Leroy Anderson House is historically significant for 2 reasons. The first reason is that the architecture reflects the period when the Harper community was transitioning from an agricultural area to a proper town. This property is also one of the earliest existing residences in Newport Heights. Part of the architectural features that make this property historically significant are shown in these photos. Specifically, metal standing seam awnings, multi-light windows and doors, terracotta attic tube vents, and stucco cladding with smooth texture finish, among other features. In addition to being architecturally significant, this property was the residence of Leroy Anderson, a prominent Costa Mesan. Leroy Anderson was a prominent local attorney who was pivotal in forming a separate school district for Costa Mesa and Newport Beach, and succeeding from the Santa Ana High School District. He was the first president of the Newport Harbor Union High School Board and served on several other boards and belonged to many other community organizations. This property was identified during the 1999 Citywide Historical Resources Survey, where it was determined to be eligible for a landmark designation. This property fulfills 2 policies within the historical and cultural resources element of the general plan, specifically HCR-1.1, and that it allows a city historic resource to be protected, and HCR-1.2, and that it results in the continued preservation of a local historic resource. The city currently has 1 property on our local historic register, and that is the Huscroft House located at 546 Bernard Street, shown in this photo. As mentioned previously, there is a tax incentive associated with a Mills Act contract. The city's estimated revenue reduction due to this contract is $2,825 annually, or approximately 20% decrease based on the county tax rate. This tax reduction may increase or decrease each year in proportion to the property's assessed value. Exact tax reduction amounts is determined by the Orange County Assessor's Office. Staff recommends the Planning Commission adopt a resolution to find that the project is exempt from CEQA under the general rule, and recommend that the City Council approve adding 208 Magnolia Street, referred to as the Leroy Anderson House, to the local historic register and authorize a contract under the Mills Act. Thank you. Staff is available for questions at this time.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Curley. That was a great presentation. Colleagues, any questions for staff? Commissioner Vivar?
Yeah, just a quick question. Thank you for Ms. Curley for your presentation. So when a historical designation is made, is it for the entire property itself or just the building itself? I'm guessing the building?
It is the building itself that's considered historically significant.
So the one, I guess, thing that I'm wondering about is I remember reading the staff report and read that there was a garage or something that was added in 1997. And, you know, obviously that was done much later than the original construction of 1926. So with designating the building, the house, a historical structure, also designate the garage and other add-ons from 1997 to the historical designation.
The entire structure would be part of the historic resource. It was deemed by the historical assessment report that although this property was added onto in the late 90s, great care was taken to maintain the historical architectural integrity of the building, and therefore it can still be considered historically authentic.
So the designation, or in 1999 is when this was added to that list of potential historical structures. But I guess at that time, the garage would have been, I guess, 2 years old.
Depending on when the building permits were finalized, yes, most
Right.
likely.
Okay. Interesting. But at the time of the designation, then the garage was already there, right? You're saying?
Yeah, correct. The garage permits show that it was already
Okay.
there.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I think that's it for me. Back to you.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Vivar. I might follow up to your line of questions just real quick for clarification. So is the owner asking, or how should I put it? Are we also being asked to look at the additions on this property as being a part of the historical resource as well, or just certain elements of the original house that's still standing?
Thank you, Chair. The whole property is considered historic,
Okay.
but the key historic features are the original structures.
Okay. And I'm trying to remember with the attachment, I believe it's attachment number 7. So you're starting on page 1, there's a few pages. Do any of these improvements overlap with some of the new elements of the property, like the additions and so forth, or is this all focused on the original house?
The historic assessment from the consultant considered the whole structure complete, where when it was reviewing the historic integrity of the property, it looked at what the new improvements did in relationship to the historic features of the structure, how it relates to it. Caitlin mentioned a few of the historic aspects that the historian will consider, but for the most part, throughout the United States, most structures, there are some key historic structures that are unchanged from their original development. Most of them are not, especially in Southern California. So this is a pretty typical scenario where there has been subsequent changes. And in order to preserve the features that are worth preserving, they basically register in many ways and with the understanding that these key features aren't taken away from the other development. Interesting enough, in some scenarios where there are historic structures, when an applicant or a property owner wants to modify the structures, which is allowed under the state and local and federal historic requirements, some of the aspects of the development, the historian will recommend that they make almost complete differences between the new development and the existing development so that one can easily tell what the changes are from original to, the later model. And in my opinion, obviously, I've got different ideas about that. This structure took a different course where the structure actually is very consistent with the new improvements versus the old.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Director Dropkin. I have several more questions, but I want to kick it over to my colleagues if you have any. Commissioner Zick.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hurley, for your presentation. Commissioner Vivar prompted a question in my mind. If this property owner wanted to build an ADU, would he be permitted to do that if this was granted a Mills Act contract?
This property would be required to remain with its historical integrity and features. So I would have to look into that further, Commissioner.
I could help out with that, Commissioner Zick. There is a process for modifications to an historic property that are on the register and on the Mills Act for that matter. And basically what the local ordinance, and it's very similar to the state and federal requirements, is changes to a historic structure that's been placed on the register are required to obtain approval of a certificate of appropriateness. And for the most part, all changes are required to go through some sort of, and in this situation, the Planning Commission review, unless there's a Mills Act or some other regulatory requirement that requires them to update with changes that have already been pre-programmed. So in answer to your question, an ADU could be considered, it wouldn't be probably placed in the front of the property, but it certainly could be, like for example, there's a garage in the back of it. And if that wasn't considered an historic component of the structure that's required to be preserved or would be impacted by our ADU, then I could see an ADU being considered and possibly reviewed. But it would most likely come in front of the Planning Commission.
Separate from the question of an ADU, is special permission required for alterations that the owner may want to do over the lifetime of his or her ownership of the property?
That is correct, Commissioner Zick.
And what is that special permission? Is it city permission or is it this historian that you referenced?
It's city permission.
Okay, and what is the special permission? Is it a different process or a different level of approval? What is special about that?
Yeah, Commissioner Zick, it's actually called a certificate of appropriateness that's required in its assessment of what the potential impacts to the resource might be.
Who decides that?
The city is responsible for review of the certificate of appropriateness. In many situations, though, the city will contract with an historian that understands the nuances and ins and outs of historic regulations.
Okay, and on that note, there was a resume in the package for Ms. Audrey Von Ahrens. Can you tell me who that is or the relationship between her and this package?
She is the historian who did the subsequent, the most recent assessment of the historic property to really inform staff and the city and the property owner of what the key elements of the historic resource are.
Got it, okay. historical information that was in this package then probably was prepared by her. It was very impressive, very complete. So I don't see her in the audience. If you could pass on some compliment to her for that.
I will.
If the owner wanted to remove the awning, would the owner be allowed to do that?
There is a process for removal and there's ordinance requirements for doing so. And we've spoke to the historic consultant about that. I assume that question might come up. And it actually requires a change in the tax assessments, basically down to zero, really what that comes down to. But our program is a voluntary program. So the city has the ability to discontinue a register designation if they feel that the property is no longer historic. And also as a voluntary program, the property owner would also be able to do that, but they could not continue with their Mills Act program.
So let me put a finer point on that question. In the 8th year of the program, the owner is required to do some maintenance and repairs on the metal awning. There's an estimate here that shows $10,000. The owner's not here. I can't ask him or her any questions, but I can't help but think an owner might look at that situation and say either number one, it's not worth spending $10,000 to deal with this decrepit awning, which 8 years from now is when this would even be applicable. And I can see where they might be interested in removing the awning to avoid the cost, $10,000, because you're not paying for it, they're paying for it. So I'd come back to my question, would the owner be allowed to remove the awning?
Again, the owner would be allowed to remove the awning under two scenarios. First of all, discontinuation of the Mills Act per the regulations, and also that it was not affecting an historical resource. So there might be a CEQA review that would have to be required to be looked into.
So if he wanted to remove the awning in the 3rd year, 3 years from now,
Right.
could the city then void the Mills Act contract with him?
The discretion to void a Mills Act is possible throughout the program lifetime
By the city?
by the city, and yes.
At director discretion or council direction?
It's
Whose authority?
It's a council discretion.
So in this plan, there are requirements that are identified each year, not each year, but specific years, certain things have to be done. Who audits that for compliance?
Staff will audit that at 5 years, and then every 5 years after that.
So the things that are required in year one, year one, year one, year one, year one, we don't audit that till year 5?
Correct.
Okay, that doesn't make sense to me. Does that make sense? Is there an explanation that makes sense about that?
I think I can understand your concerns about it. It's not a highly regulated program.
Can we audit sooner than 5 years?
We certainly could.
And if you didn't do the things that are in year one, and there's $100,000 worth of improvements we expect in year one according to this.
Correct. And remember, this program was worked out with the historian and the applicant, the property owner. So they've worked together to put this program together. It wasn't just a program that the city or the historian suggested and that was going to be final. It was something that was a process that was worked out between the property owner, and they agreed to these terms. The other thing that I think might be important for maybe a little bit more acceptance of why that there's some benefits to the program is and I don't know if it's clear, because it took me a moment to really kind of dive into it and understand. The tax incentives don't stop at 10 years. They continue throughout the life of the property. So
The life of the contract.
the life of the well, yeah, the contract gets extended yearly after the 10-year program is completed.
By mutual agreement.
Correct.
So if we cancel it after 10 years, the property tax reduction does not continue.
That's correct.
Just want to be clear.
No problem.
The work plan, you said it had been worked out between the historian and the property owner. Does that mean that there's an agreement and a contract? Or is this still being negotiated and what we're looking to approve is more conceptual in nature?
The contract and work plan are currently in draft form, but as Deputy Director Drapkin mentioned, these documents were created, even the drafts, with the consensus and working together with the applicant. We don't expect any significant changes to the work plan between now and its final version.
Okay, and then just one last question. So item number 4, which is supposed to occur in the first year, says to repaint exterior wall and trim throughout. Work item number 10, which occurs in the 7th year, deals with the exterior wood trim windows and doors, gently scrape paint, make necessary repairs to wood and repaint. Is that a repeat of the work that is expected in year 1, where we are repainting the exterior wall and trim throughout? What's also happening in the first year is brand new windows are being put in. That's work item number 2. But then in work item number 10, 7 years from now, they were saying come back and paint and scrape these areas. Is that?
Yeah, that's an example of a maintenance requirement.
Okay.
You can see it's a little bit less value than the original one that you
Right.
indicated.
And they might determine that at that point there really isn't any maintenance to be done.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. All right, that's it. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Zick. Commissioner Andrade, anything? Okay. I have similar questions to Commissioner Zick along the lines of the cost of certain items for rehabilitation restoration in, gosh, what is it, attachment 7? Attachment 7. As compared to page 5 of the staff agenda, bottom, under fiscal review, it says that there's a $2,825 annual tax reduction benefit, which over the course of, let's say, 10 years for that initial contract, that's just shy of $30,000, right? And then when we start adding up all of the costs of, the items to be completed during that 10-year time frame, we see that it's exponentially higher than the tax reduction benefit that they experience. So can you talk a little bit more about that discrepancy between the two? It almost seems like the property owner is voluntarily entering into an agreement whereby they are on the hook to have to do improvements. And if they don't, then they could be cut out of the program altogether.
Thank you for that question, Chair Arith. That is correct. The tax reduction is meant to assist the applicant in covering these expenses associated with maintaining such an old structure. Although the cost of that maintenance may be noticeable and felt by the owner, they are providing a very useful public good to the city, and also have something to be proud of in that they own a historic resource.
Sure. So I think theoretically this would be the second Mills Act property in the city, Hooscroft being the first.
Correct.
Okay.
And one thing I might add on to Caitlin's response is that there is a noticeable imbalance between the benefits versus what the costs might be from a Mills Act program. But in reality, most of these property owners enjoy having an historic property, and they more than likely are going to maintain it anyways. So this really is just an added benefit to what they're probably already going to do for the most part.
Okay.
I can say that there's probably more on that than usual, but it's a great value to the community, like Caitlin mentioned, and yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Director Dropkin. Because we don't have the applicant here to ask certain questions, let me go ahead and set a floor to this discussion, and maybe propose a worst case scenario and enlighten me if you will. If the applicant if they do not have to give any information over the period of 5 years, they're basically making just shy of $15,000 worth of tax reduction benefit in their property. What happens if they enter into a mills contract and then 5 years later they say, well, we don't want to participate in it anymore? Does the city then just lose out on $15,000 worth of benefit to have the property improved and any other item that might fall under Exhibit C, Attachment 7 for rehabilitating certain features on the property?
Should the applicant deem that the costs outweigh the benefits of their project, they can back out or, leave the Mills Act contract through writing to the city. Conversely, if the city finds that the applicant is not keeping up with their property as described in the contract, we at the city council discretion can also negate the contract.
Okay. But we wouldn't know that for 5 years because they're only on the hook to provide that information after 5 years, at which point they've experienced just shy of $15,000 worth of tax reduction benefit.
That is correct, and if the commission was concerned that that this might not equate to a modifications to the structure that were balanced with the incentives, we could review them on a yearly basis. It just would take a lot of staff effort, and it's not typical. Another thing I might mention is the ordinance does have a section that has provisions for enforcement and penalties. So we could also administer that. Some ordinances that are more robust actually have a stipulations that ask them to repay, but ours does not have that.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Let me just turn a few pages to see if I have any other notes here. Colleagues, if you have any questions, you're welcome to jump in if you'd like.
Just a quick question on how does this, so obviously lovely to have a second now historic home identified in our community, but how does this, benefit impact, neighbors? Like, there's a plaque? I mean, I haven't visited the other home, so I'll definitely put that on my places to visit. But is there a plaque that gets placed somewhere? Can people, kind of go by? It gets added to a map somewhere. I'm sure the Costa Mesa Historic Society will probably label it, or, what takes place after it's granted?
Correct. This is a new program. It hasn't been experienced much in the city. From a plaque perspective, I did speak with the property owner early on, and I mentioned that I'd like to provide them a plaque for doing this and put it out in front of the property, because it does show the cultural benefits of the property, and one plaque can lead to some other properties that might be interested in that as well. In that area, there are several, if not dozens, of historic properties from my drive-by visuals that could easily be considered historic resources. So, the general plan suggests that staff encourage this program as much as possible. There hasn't been a lot of effort so far to really progress this ordinance to a point where we can really do a lot of outreach with historic properties and try to encourage these property owners to get on this program. But from now on, we are definitely going to have the benefits of going through this process recently and then speaking with the Historic Society and I do plan on meeting with them and encourage them to sort of establish more of a robust program for outreach.
That's awesome. So, and I think attachment 2 is a letter from the property owner, right? I mean, it's.
There is.
A brief message, I think, from him. Sounds like he took the initiative to get this started. So, like you both said, it's really a personal interest and preservation and the historic kind of piece of it. So,
Yes, it is a voluntary program.
yeah, awesome.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Andrade. I'll go back to my line of questioning earlier in talking about staff effort and time. If you would please turn to attachment 6, page 3, under section 6, payment of fees. It says here, fees may include but are not limited to an inspection fee for each required inspection of the property for the purpose of covering the reasonable cost of performing required periodic inspections. So if it was would this be a catch-all if there was any concern about staff time and effort going into ensuring that the property owner is adhering to the items listed in the workflow item?
Yes, Chair.
Okay, all right. So we'll keep that in mind. Fees can be collected. Is the property owner theoretically allowed to bounce around for some of these proposed rehabilitation items? So do they have to follow first year contract going all the way up to 10, or if they find that there's something that they need to do, they can go to year 8?
So that's a great question. Staff did discuss that with the consultant, and she believed that flexibility was very important with these programs, and they should allow for those things.
Okay. Let's see here. I don't think I see anything else. I will mention, though, so I'm trying to remember the scope and intent of the Historical Preservation Committee here in the city. I'm not sure that it's required to have to go through them because they're very narrow in scope in terms of what they do. It's like identify 6 properties per year and engage with the Historical Society. I would say that for items like this, it would be my hope that it would be presented to them to kind of get their stamp of approval, should it fall under their scope of work. If not, then maybe the Parks Commission could take a look at this too. Do you have any thoughts on that, Director Drapkin?
I do agree with the chair's assessment on that. The committee they haven't met in some time. However, as of today, I did see a notice that they are meeting at the end of this week, and there's a new business item for the dissolution of the historic committee, which is kind of ironic, but they are going to be mostly involved, I believe the outcome of it will be with the Historical Society instead. And I absolutely agree in the future, when a program becomes potentially more robust, that society will be definitely contacted. In this situation, there was a little less reasons to do that in the fact that this property was already on the inventory, it was already in the general plan, and staff had an assessment prepared. The reason that staff had the assessment prepared was specifically to the fact that we didn't have a committee to rely on at that point. So, but in future, I definitely agree with that, and I think we'll definitely go further to involve them as the society turns into our historic review.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, again, I'm not sure it falls within their purview per se. I just find it's a little ironic. They're called Historical Preservation Committee and they didn't get to weigh in on it. Last question. It seems to me like there might be some interest from staff to build out the historical preservation program. If that's the case, do you have any long-range view or plan for how we can build this out? Because generally speaking, it seems to be a pretty neat idea.
Yeah, currently we don't have a real program in mind to go forward. Certainly there are so many great examples of historic resource programs surrounding the city. And really, it's a great program to have to protect neighborhood resources and just aesthetic assets, really. So I completely agree with that. One of my goals would be to further reach out and very consistent with the general plan, which we have policies that say to do so. So absolutely, answer is yes to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Director Drapkin. Colleagues, do you have any further questions? Commissioner Zick.
Commissioner Andrade piqued my interest with one of her questions about whether this property would end up on a map somewhere that might clue people into an opportunity to drive by and see a historic building. Obviously, they can't go in it. Somebody lives there. And I believe the answer probably was yes. In the staff report, there's an indication that there are 31 historical properties in the city. Are those addresses publicly available?
Yes, Commissioner, those can be found in a list within the historic and cultural resources element of our general plan.
So based on that, anybody, including Commissioner Andrade or myself, could drive by all 31 of these properties, look at them and enjoy them, which then leads to the question that I've got in my mind. Maybe it's an easy question for you. What's the benefit to the city to entering into a Mills Act contract with this property owner when we could drive by this property and the other 31 anytime we wanted?
The benefit of the Mills Act contract is that it provides a framework and a more solid future for the property to be maintained with its historical integrity. And therefore be enjoyed in the future by future Costa Mesa residents.
It doesn't obligate the homeowner to keep the property and its historical components, but maybe it increases the likelihood?
That's correct. It provides an incentive to continue the maintenance.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Zick. Anyone else?
A few questions, yeah, Chair.
Commissioner Bovar.
So I guess the one house historical building we have is a house called the Moscroft House or something. Does that have a plaque outside it? And is my first question related to that? And second is, did that property have any post-original construction modifications that had been done to it, such as, in this case, the garage?
So that was an interesting property. It was relocated to that area, as I understand it, and it was refurbished when it was relocated. I did not see a plaque outside of the property when I did go by there, but it doesn't mean that I won't try to offer them one. So that's my goal. If we can get something like that started, it would be really great.
Okay. Something I'm curious about now is, so this is a 10-year contract. Could at some point the property owner, say at 5 years, sell the property and in the property listing say blah blah blah, 4 rooms, 2 bathrooms. Oh, and by the way, a historical property. Would they be able to do that? And if so, then would the Mills contract be passed on to the new property owner, or is that only the Mills contract cease at that point of sale?
The Mills contract runs with the land.
So a new property owner would be required to stay in it unless they, I guess, decided to opt out of it, which is also possible.
Correct.
And in the spirit of preservation, have any of the properties, including this one, that are designated as historical, undergone any preservation work, such as seismic retrofits or termite studies to make sure that none of the wooden structural components could be potentially compromised?
Not that I'm aware of.
interesting to me because I would expect that if we want to make sure that the houses can be enjoyed by future generations, we would make sure that they wouldn't, fall if we were to hit by a, say, 5.5 earthquake tomorrow in Costa Mesa or something. Okay, well, that's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Vivar. Anyone else before we move things along? Commissioner Zick.
Just in case Commissioner Vivar didn't notice it, work item number 8 in year 5 is a structural engineer assessment that would result in recommendations for seismic retrofit. Doesn't obligate them to do any work, but it obligates them to get a structural engineer assessment.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Zick. All right, seeing nobody else, I will open the public hearing. And do we have the applicant online or on the phone?
We do not, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Curley.
We did, however, invite the applicant and suggested they do arrive.
Okay. All right, so we'll move past applicant. We'll go ahead and open for public comments. I don't see anybody in chambers here. Do we have anyone on Zoom or telephone?
No, we do not, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let's just go ahead and give it a minute. I'll read the full thing in case anyone wants to call in. If you're using Zoom, please use the raised hand option. If you're joining the meeting on your phone and would like to speak, please press *9. Do we have anybody?
No, we do not.
All right, thanks, Anna. I'll go ahead and close the public comment portion of the public hearing. And commissioners, do you have any further questions for staff? All right, seeing none. Now close the public hearing and entertain a motion, please. Motion, I don't see anything popping up yet. Oh, motion made by Commissioner Andrade. What is your motion, Commissioner?
To approve as recommended by the department.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Rojas. Commissioner Andrade, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, just to add that it's a really great opportunity, I think, for our community to highlight some of the ways that we're preserving history and really trying to maintain some storytelling that Costa Mesa provides and its uniqueness in that space. So, yeah, welcome, and I'm excited to see how we can continue to build upon the program. Great job.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Rojas, would you like to speak to the item?
Just to echo Commissioner Andrade's comments, that I find this program interesting and a little bit, long time coming. So I'm glad to see that we're taking a step in that direction. Other than that, that's it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Zick?
I'll speak to the motion. I won't be supporting the motion. I like history a lot, like history of the community a lot. I stood for, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes with Director Drapkin looking at historical photos of the city and talking about it. So he knows that I'm interested in this subject. Quite frankly, I'm a little put off by the fact that the property owner isn't here. I don't know the reason for that. It would seem to me, if it was my property, this would be something important to me, I'd make the effort. I've got questions I can't ask because he's not here or she's not here. It appears to me that at this point, the only people that care about this is, I guess, staff and those who make the motion and support the motion. I guess I just have trouble with this. I don't see the veracity, commitment, some of the things seem vague. And again, I don't have all the information that I'd like to have to make a decision, largely because the applicant isn't here.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Is it Commissioner?
I too want to speak on the motion. I also will not be supporting the motion, and I think some of my sentiments fall in line with Commissioner Zigg's assessment. I too love history, and people who know me personally know that I'm a history buff, and I think it is important to preserve history and historical structures. But I frankly don't think that this program really accomplishes that goal because, I mean, just for example, with the seismic retrofit and kind of structural integrity questions I had earlier, to me, if we really wanted to preserve historical structures, I think we'd make it a point that the structure itself is preserved rather than its architectural elements, because architectural elements are fine, but you know, really to preserve a structure, you know, we have to make sure that it'll survive any kind of natural disasters that we're prone to out here, which again, we know are earthquakes in our case. And if anybody has watched any videos or documentaries about the preservation of historical structures in Europe, for example, a lot of these cathedrals and castles and whatnot have had structural reinforcements done as well. And if anybody were to go down to the Mission San Juan Capistrano as well, and other of the California missions, which are buildings far older than this, have also gone through various preservation projects to make sure that they withstand earthquakes again. California, as that is the main threat to not just historical, but any structures. So I personally don't think that this designation really accomplishes preservation of a historical structure, and I also am a bit. I don't feel great about the idea that a new addition to the structure would also be considered as historical, since, in my opinion, I think you could make a philosophical argument that the form of the initial structure is no longer the same. And I too am a bit off-put by the fact that the property owner isn't here, because I would think that if you know, your property is being considered by the Planning Commission for this designation, that you would be here. You would care enough to be at the Planning Commission meeting and answer the questions of commissioners, and care enough to, you know, see whether or not the designation goes through, because nothing on the Planning Commission or any city or government body is ever guaranteed. Yeah, so while I think we should preserve history and should make sure that historical structures can be preserved for future study or enjoyment of generations to come, I don't think that this accomplishes that. And those are my comments. Thank you.
All right, thank you for your thoughts, Commissioner Vivar. Just right off the bat, I'll be supporting the motion, so this will be passing. I won't spend a lot of time on over talking this, but I will say that I understand some of the sentiments about retrofits. I understand that if we really wanted to preserve something, we would make sure that it lasts through time and could withstand some of the, you know, acts of God or natural disasters that we experience here in California. But I also understand that some of those methods require a lot of money. more money at times than the actual structure and property is worth. And for the low cost of about $30,000 over the course of 10 years, this seems like a really low price point for the city to kind of sweeten the deal and say, hey, you know what, there are some structures around here in the city that have some historical significance, either by way of their architecture or by the person who occupied it, or about 10 other criteria that fall under it. So I think it's the beginning of something that I hope actually develops further into a bona fide program, to where once the community actually catches wind of something like, hey, Costa Mesa is doing some historical preservation, they want to go for it, let's submit some applications and see if we can retain some of these, cute bungalow style houses that we see around town. And not just the bungalows, it could be other things too. I think this is the start to something more. So if there are any reservations about, the cost or losing the tax the tax to the city, I think it's at a low enough price point to warrant, we'll move forward with this. Hopefully staff can further develop this idea. And by the next time we see another historical application, it'll be even better than this one. So with that, Anna, if we could call the question. Thank you.
Commissioner Vivar, if you don't mind marking your. That motion carries 3-2 with Commissioner Zick and Commissioner Vivar voting no.
All right, thank you, Anna. That decision is final unless appealed to the City Council within 7 days. Thank you very much, everyone, for your discussion. Thank you, Ms. Curley, for the presentation. That was great. Let's go ahead and take a 5-minute break, if only for the fact that my screen isn't working in some parts. So we'll see you in about 5 minutes. Thank you. All right, welcome back to the Costa Mesa Planning Commission meeting of January 22nd, 2024. I call the meeting back into order. And Anna, if you'd please read the title for public hearing item number 2.
Public hearing item number 2. Ordinance to amend Title 13, Planning, Zoning, and Development of the Costa Mesa Municipal Code and ordinance to amend Title 9, License and Business Regulations for modifications to the city's retail cannabis provisions. Please note we have not received public comments on this item. This is a call for any ex parte communications.
All right, thank you, Anna. Commissioner Vivar.
There we go. I do, in fact, have 2 ex parte communications. I got emails from 2 community members named Janet and Judith, and they'll have to excuse me, I forgot their last names. But I basically emailed back in receipt of their, and let them that I was in receipt of their emails. And that was pretty much it. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Vivar. Commissioner Zick?
I received emails from Judith Booth, which I did not reply to, and from Janet, which I not only replied to, but had an extensive discussion with her. And then I had another telephone conversation today with another member of the public who also represents a number of cannabis businesses.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Zick. Commissioner Rojas, any ex parte to communicate?
None, sir.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Andrade?
I think I was in that email chain with Ms. Booth and Leftis. That's about it.
All right, thank you. And I, too, was in that email chain with Judith Booth and Janet Chenoweth, but did not respond to either email. So with that, I'll now turn it over to Ms. Halligan to present the item. Ms. Halligan.
Good evening, Chair Arith and Planning Commissioners. I'm Michelle Halligan, Contract Planner for the Economic and Development Services Department. The item before you includes the draft modifications to the city's retail cannabis ordinances. In September last year, the City Council voted to direct the Planning Commission to explore potential amendments regarding 8 topics. On November 27th, the Planning Commission discussed potential modifications related to 4 of those topics. The item was continued to December 11th, 2023. On that date, the Planning Commission discussed the remaining 4 topics and directed staff to draft amendments to the city's cannabis ordinances pertaining to 6 of the 8 topics. The proposed location criteria amendments in Title 13 include establishing a minimum separation of 500 feet between cannabis storefronts, measured as the shortest distance between an existing storefront and a proposed storefront premise. Increasing the minimum separation between cannabis storefronts and youth centers from 600 feet to 1,000 feet. And establishing a minimum of 100 foot between cannabis storefronts and properties zoned for residential use. The last 2 would be measured from the shortest distance between the sensitive use property line and the licensed premise. The Planning Commission also directed staff to draft an amendment allowing the approval of 30 cannabis storefronts with a future cap of 15 storefronts. The following new language would be added to Title 13. A maximum of 30 conditional use permits for cannabis storefronts may be approved by the city. Following the approval of the 30th, no further conditional use permits for cannabis storefronts may be approved until the total number of existing conditional use permits falls below 15, after which time the city may approve further conditional use permits not to exceed a total of 15 conditional use permits for cannabis storefronts in the city. Similar changes would be made in Title IX, reflecting the 30 to 15 approach to cannabis business permits. The existing operating requirements for cannabis businesses in Title IX require a notice prohibiting consumption and loitering. The Planning Commission directed staff to draft an amendment to clarify the size of the notice and allow the word cannabis to be used. As proposed, the modified language would read, each entrance to a cannabis retail business shall be visibly posted with 1 clear and legible notice up to 12 inches by 18 inches in size, indicating that smoking, ingesting, or otherwise consuming cannabis on the premises or in the areas adjacent to the business is prohibited. The word cannabis would be allowed to be used up to 2 times on each of these specific notices. Letter height in the notice shall be limited to up to 1 inch in size. All notice lettering shall be the same font and color. The Planning Commission directed staff to add a requirement restricting depictions of youth in cannabis advertising and marketing. Staff is proposing the following amendment language. Cannabis business advertising and/or marketing materials in the city shall not encourage persons under 21 years of age to consume cannabis or cannabis products and shall not depict and/or suggest in any way the consumption of cannabis or cannabis products. Reflective of the Planning Commission's desire to allow the total number of cannabis storefronts to eventually decrease from 30 to 15 over time, several points of clarification are proposed regarding situations in which storefront CUPs, CBPs, or renewal may be voided, forfeited, denied, and so on. Amendments to 13-200-93D4 clarifies that the use must comply with all conditional use permit conditions of approval. Modifications to 13-200-937 include provisions for terminating CUPs at locations where the cannabis retail storefront use is now nonconforming and discontinued and/or replaced. Modifications to Title 9-488 would clarify that a cannabis business permit holder, use, and application for renewal must be compliant with the adopted administrative regulations and that failure to comply and submit timely renewal fees shall be grounds for denying a renewal. As proposed, Title 9-493 would be amended to specify that failure to hold a valid business license shall render the CBP invalid. Staff is also proposing text modifications to clarify existing and proposed law and intent. 9-490A clarifies that a CBP may be revoked and/or suspended and deemed abandoned or forfeited pursuant to the procedures in a later section. 9-490D add business, the present tense engages in, and during the application process. 9-494, an approval of a CUP does not waive any state or local requirements. 9-495H16, operate shall include remitting taxes to the city. It provides more detail about cannabis business abandonment and forfeiting the CBP. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission adopts a resolution to find that the project is categorically exempt from the environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to CEQA guidelines sections 15061B3 General Rule, and that the updates to the city's retail cannabis provisions will not have a significant impact on the environment, and recommends that the City Council give first reading to ordinances approving a code amendment amending portions of the Costa Mesa Municipal Code, Title 13, Planning, Zoning, and Development, and a code amendment amending portions of Title 9, Licenses and Business Regulations, both pertaining to retail cannabis storefront regulations. This concludes staff's presentation. I'm available to answer your questions.
All right, thank you, Ms. Halligan. Colleagues, starting with Commissioner Vivar.
Thank you, Ms. Halligan, for your very professional way of summarizing 2 meetings worth of discussions in a PowerPoint. I only have one question, and that's about the part of the presentation and staff report about the CBPs when and this is the section about the cap of 30, essentially, the limiting CBPs to 30, and then basically over time letting that number go down to 15 per our recommendation. So if once 30 are operating, one of them happens to, one of the cannabis businesses goes out of business, would that operator be able to sell their, I guess, their retail storefront to another operator? And would that new operator then be able to enjoy the CBP, or would that CBP essentially be extinguished as soon as that operator goes out of business?
Commissioner Vivar, if a retail owner were to sell their CBP, they would actually, the new owners would have to obtain a new CBP, and because we've already issued 30, we would not be able to take in that application and process a new CBP.
I see. So essentially, after the 30, after 30 CBPs have been issued, essentially those CBPs no longer run with the land until there's 15 of them operating.
Commissioner Vivar, I just want to clarify that the CBP is a cannabis business permit.
Oh, right.
So it doesn't run with the land.
Okay.
So in this case, if they were to try to, sell 50% or more of the business, the proposed new owners would not have an opportunity to obtain a new CBP because we would not be accepting those applications and processing them.
And would there be a way for us to know if, are they obligated to tell us about, say, their termination of business operations? Or would they be able to sell to another operator that continues to do business under the same name, and we just never find out?
Well, Commissioner Vivar, we have a renewal process every 2 years in which we do look at their ownership structure. They also report to finance.
I see.
And there are multiple mechanisms in which the city can investigate the operations.
Okay. Yeah, all right. I think that's really it in terms of my questions. So, Chair, I kick it back to you.
All right. Thank you, sir. Commissioner Zick.
Great questions by Commissioner Vivar. Excellent clarification responses by you, Ms. Halligan. I want to thank you for your report. I think it's excellent. And I just wanted to comment, in case Bill hasn't picked up in the first 4 days that he's been here, that I greatly appreciate your thoroughness, your accuracy, your professionalism, and your toughness. I greatly appreciate it. You're an asset to the city staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Zick. Commissioner Rojas, Commissioner Andrade.
If you could maybe walk us through how would the amendments to the limit of cannabis storefronts, the cap, like how would we operationalize the approval of 30 going down to 50 over time? Like when would be an opportunity where we get closer to that 15, right? Because if I read this correctly, by approving 30, we potentially could see 30, a total of will be an additional 10 storefronts, right? Opening up or being approved.
So Commissioner Andrade, right now we have 22 CUPs that are approved. So we would be processing 8. And ultimately, if those storefronts were to open, they would be subject to our renewals for CBPs and complying with all of our local and state laws as well as their conditions of approval. So there may be instances in which they're found to not be in compliance and they could lose their CBP. There are also instances in which they cease operations, and in which case they would also lose their ability to maintain that CBP here in Costa Mesa.
So these amendments would be in effect for those upcoming 8 that we would review, correct?
The location requirements would not be, because they've already passed through our location criteria review. But once they're operational, if they are within those minimum separations, those locations would be considered non-conforming and subject to non-conforming provisions, including if they're non-operational. We would have specific cannabis regulations to allow us to move forward with revoking the CUP and CBP.
So would that be at that 2-year renewal?
It could happen at the 2-year renewal. It could also happen at other times in which the business is found to be non-operational or in violation of the requirements.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner Andrade. Commissioner Rojas.
To clarify and continue that point, we're saying there's 22 approved currently, which means we're going to accept 8 more. I'm assuming there's more than that in line waiting for approval. So let's just say it's 18 that are waiting. So those remaining 10 would have to wait until we're down back under 15, and then they go one at a time. That's correct.
Commissioner Rojas, we do have, several other applications that are in the CP process that we would get through. If not all of them are approved, we would have some space available to process additionals, but the other applicants would be subject to waiting, or they have the option of withdrawing their application.
Okay, that's. I just wanted to clarify that point. It was my understanding, but I wanted to go on record and make sure that we said that out loud. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Rojas. Ms. Halligan, how many folks do we have in the queue that have been given the notice to proceed to a planning commission hearing? Do we have 7 or 8?
Chair Erith, right now we have 8 CUP applicants. They have not received a letter with a tentative date, but they are in the CUP process.
Okay, so theoretically we've got 30 right there. In the event, I guess this is a point of clarification. In the event that we deny any one of those, then we would still have to continue processing until we get up to 30, correct?
That is correct, the way the draft ordinance is written.
Okay, so it's not necessarily that we're just getting through the next 8 and then hell or high water, that's it. We have to go to 30. That's how it's written, correct?
That is correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right. I have several questions and then several, I think, clarification-based questions here.
Chair,
Yes, sir.
on that point, before you get started,
Sure, go for it.
I know what our intent was on the 30, and it was to be fair to people that are close to the finish line. I don't think, so for example, if there were only 5 in the queue that were close to the finish line, and that took us to 27, I don't think that means 3 more people could come along and apply, because the intent is to get to 15, and the intent was to be fair to people that are close to the finish line. Somebody who's not even close to the finish line doesn't mean they could still apply in terms of what our intent is. And hopefully that's the way it would be understood by council.
Yeah, and I have to agree with you, Commissioner Zick. I think that that's what the intent was as well.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the whole question is, well, what happens in the event that we find a substandard application that we end up denying? Are we then on the hook to continue processing past the 8 that are currently in the queue?
Thanks for letting me comment.
Yeah, sure thing. Thank you, Commissioner Zick. All right, Ms. Halligan, Director Dropkin, Director Lee, buckle up. Got a couple questions. Nothing too bad. Okay, so I think to just point the public in the direction of what Commissioner Vivar was talking about earlier, if you go to staff agenda page 6 and you look under limit on cannabis storefronts, it'll talk about the CUP, CBP renewal process in the paragraph right before you get to the bullet points. And then you can also look at attachment number 4, page 2, and attachment number 5, page 7 for the exact language of how those ordinance language changes read as well. If we turn to staff agenda page 9 and we look at the top in the field under 4-495H16 for additional operating requirements, it says to clarify that, quote, operate shall include but not be limited to remitting monthly taxes, emphasis on monthly. But if you turn to attachment 5, page 13, there's a lot of attachments here, by the way, so it might take me a sec. Attachment 5, page 13. Missed it. But I think there was some language in there that read quarterly. Let me find the exact line, because I... Yeah, it's in number 16 on page 13. It says, a cannabis retail business shall be considered non-operational and abandoned after failing to report income and or reporting no income to the city in any one quarter. But in what's written in the staff agenda, it says that they have to remit monthly. So I just wanted, I guess, a clarification on that. It's that technically they're supposed to be remitting monthly, but they do technically have up until a quarter to remit taxes back to the city, at which point if they do not remit within that quarter, then they're found to be non-operational, and then we could go after the taxes after that. Just wanted to hear staff's perspective, and Mr. Preziosi, if you'd like to weigh in as well, that's fine.
Sure, thank you. Chair, I'll start out. So there are really two separate issues. The issue you just discussed was the ability to determine that a cannabis business permit is non-operational based on failure to remit taxes quarterly, right? The other issue is, my understanding is currently the cannabis businesses actually do remit taxes on a monthly basis, on a monthly basis, although in the code, it requires them to remit on a yearly basis or more often as required by the city, and the city has been requesting that they submit it on a monthly basis. So we may be coming forward with further amendments prior to going to city council, just to revise some of the language, allowing for yearly reporting to actually codify it to be monthly reporting. Does that answer your question, Chair?
It sure does. Thank you, Mr. Preziosi. Thank you for weighing in. Just turning pages to look at some notes here. If we turn to attachment number 4, Exhibit A, page 4, number 9, outdoor seating or patio areas are prohibited. I'm trying to remember, didn't we hear an item on Newport Boulevard for a retail cannabis operator who proposed outdoor seating for their staff?
There was a outdoor area for a break room for the staff on Newport Boulevard, right near 17th Street, or just before not before 17th, but before 19th Street, I believe.
Yeah, it was by one of the mobile home parks. I just wanted to see how staff felt about that. Like, I don't want to be pithy or anything. It's just, Are we going to allow outdoor seating just not for customers or for the staff? Ms. Halligan.
Chairman Arith, it's really critical that if there is any outdoor space, it is limited to those badged employees only.
Okay.
And that would be part of like their limited access area that customers would not be allowed. And always ingesting, smoking, and otherwise consuming cannabis on those properties is prohibited.
Sure. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Halligan. If we just turn to the next page, 5, and we look under K, I'll read it for you. And I guess my question before going into this, and this might be a Mr. Preziosi question, I wrote down, is the phrasing already implied, or is this just kind of a doubling down of the language? Any cannabis use, including but not limited to those involving sale, delivery, and or dispensing that is not permitted, licensed, or otherwise in full compliance with all applicable provisions of this code and state and local law, shall not be considered a legally nonconforming use pursuant to and notwithstanding any contrary provisions of Chapter 9 of this title. It already kind of seemed to me that would be implied. I didn't know if this was just an extra layer that was needed.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Arith. This was clarification.
Okay.
To codify specific clarification, so there was no room for doubt the applicable standards for legally nonconforming uses, and it clearly distinguished between other nonconforming use provisions of the code that may be less precise.
Okay. All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. If we go to attachment, attachment 5, page 4, we go down to what is described as youth center. And I wanted to get staff's opinion on this. Are we all on the same page? Okay. That in the first sentence, public or private facility that is primarily used to host recreation, how are we defining primarily? Anything that's over like 50% of the use is by children would be considered primarily used by children? Within the very limited scope of what is considered a youth center.
Chair Arith, these definitions were created during the Measure Q process, of which I was not a part, so I'm not sure if they established like a minimum percentage. But based on how it's been implemented, I have observed that this is specifically designed for sort of youth gathering uses, such as childcare, and specific to arcades where 10 or more games are located. But perhaps Tarquin or Director Lee would have more information about how Measure Q, that definition was developed for Measure Q.
Yeah, and as I recall, and from being informed, this was a city council adjusted definition at the time of the ordinance. So, if that helps.
Okay.
It's not a base state requirement, so to speak. This is a customized local city provision, definition.
Okay. And I also say, I think I achieved my goal in getting you to turn your mic on, Director Lee. So please weigh in.
Thank you. I'm happy to help with this one as I was here during that time. So I think that Ms. Halligan is correct, though. The focus of this definition is really on the latter part of it. It gives such specific examples of what is considered a youth center that the word primarily doesn't need to be enforced because the examples at the end of the definition are so specific. So I think that anyone would say that any one of those examples is primarily used to host recreational or social activities for minors. So it's never come into play for that reason.
So maybe I could push this a little bit more. So with just the definition of that the facility is primarily used, and then we look down at the penultimate sentence or the second to last sentence, dance studios, tutoring, martial arts, or similar uses. So what we're saying is that for these specific, and maybe this is for more of the public to know, that for these specific uses, if it is primarily used for youth activities, then it would be included. But then there's a definition at the bottom that says these are not included. So this, even if it's primarily used by children, those uses are not actually counted towards this. I don't know if we want to chat about it at all. I know it's come up about a couple dozen times so far. Commissioner Zick.
If I can comment on this.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So the definition of youth center, primarily to host social or recreation activities for minors, comes from the Health and Safety Code. And the Health and Safety Code, that particular provision dates from the 1990s. The concept of youth center has long been part of American culture. Think of, the 4-H, the Boys and Girls Club, things like that. And the concept, long predates the modern concept of strip malls and these businesses that cater to children, such as karate studios, dance studios, things like that, primarily commercial, or tutoring centers. And cities up and down the state have somewhat struggled with what really is a youth center. Because if you take a literal definition, any place where children gather, that fairly clearly isn't the intent of the legislature. Because state law, but as I said, state law just defines state law being the Health and Safety Code, which is part of the Business and Professions Code that was adopted under Prop 64 and subsequent legislative enactments. So the point I'm making is the City Council, as well as the committee that put together the Measure Q ordinances, felt it was necessary to define by exclusion what is not a youth center. Otherwise, almost every retail center in the city, and a lot of cities in Orange County, would exclude cannabis just because they have things that could arguably be thought of as a youth center. And this is an issue that's been been dealt with up and down the state. Many cities define youth center by exclusion, some define it by inclusion. But the City Council, when they're working on this, decided to specifically define it by excluding certain activities that were not youth centers.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Preziosi. I think it's not necessarily to drill down on youth center, but seeing as how City Council asked us to weigh in on sensitive uses and buffers, this seemed to fall within one of the 8 asks that they made of us. Commissioner Zick.
So I appreciate you asking questions about this item, specifically the definition of it. I would echo the last part of your comment that the City Council asked us to look at the separation requirement aspect of youth centers not the definitional aspect of youth centers. I do believe that the definition should be reviewed by council, even though they didn't ask us to make a recommendation. And to the extent that they want to stick with this definition for whatever purpose or agenda they have for doing that, then I think the corollary request that I've made in the past, a suggestion I've made, is that we should have a separation requirement for youth-centric businesses. So if you don't want to touch youth center and the definition, and for whatever reason, fine. Separation from youth-centric businesses is something that I think should be considered. Council didn't ask us to look at it, though. I just wanted to make that comment.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Zick. And I was thinking about that a bit over the last few days as well. And I think, you know, the minutes will reflect in our last meeting when you discussed it, and also I hope tonight it'll be reflected in the minutes as well, so we could take note of that. I just wanted to have a better understanding of the definition, because we are looking at buffers with the existing definition of youth centers, which may or may not be sufficient on some level. Commissioner Vivar, do you have a?
Yeah, I just wanted to, again, second your and Commissioner Zick's comments about that. And on top of that, before we move on from the sensitive uses topic, Commissioner Zick as well, I think very wisely pointed out that what at least I see, and I believe he sees as well, is a, I don't know, call it flawed logic regarding the parks and having sort of a circle drawn around the a playground, which seems to imply that outside the playground circle, you wouldn't have children, which is just plainly ridiculous in my opinion. Even if this isn't in the form of a policy recommendation, I at least would like the minutes to reflect that this is one of at least mine and Commissioner Zick's and possibly other colleagues' concerns, that the City Council reevaluate the sensitive use of parks to hopefully include the property line of the park rather than simply a play area where probably only the very youngest children might be, but some of the other kids we'd think would be playing in the grass, say kicking around the ball or something like that. So just wanted to make sure that goes on the record.
Sure. Thank you, Commissioner Vivar. And I hope that goes on the record as well. And I'm sure City Council's watching as we speak.
Chair, if I might.
Sure.
I wanted to acknowledge that during one of the last hearings, Commissioner Zick brought up approximately 5 items. We actually have them on a slide. One of them including youth-centric and another youth center as well, 3 other items. And the council did determine to put it on, we wanted to show it on the record. Staff's intention is to put it in the council report as added items that the commission suggested. So we can show that slide if you care, however, but we do have the 5.
Yeah, you know what, if staff doesn't mind, let's put it up on the screen for the public to just take note, just real quick. Is the public seeing that?
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. All right, moving things along.
Just, sorry, one quick thing to add to that. When we reviewed this in one of the past meetings, Ms. Halligan had a great sample on how other cities have this piece defined, and I think it was the Long Beach example that included it to exclude its vicinity to youth serving facilities. I think that was a term, Long Beach. So just to add to your documentation there, might be a great best practice to share Long Beach's example.
Sure. And just so my colleagues know, I'm happy to let some of this go into the record for City Council consideration. You know, naturally this, or specifically rather, City Council did not ask us to review these particular things, but these are in tangent with some of the work that we're doing, so I don't want to focus too much on it, as I'm sure that they'll be litigating it themselves. So, moving along, and thank you for indulging me, everyone. I know that this is a little bit on the longer side, but I read this thing a couple times, so we just want to make sure we're all on the same page. If we turn to page 6 of the same attachment, we go down to section D, ineligibility. It says that no person or entity shall be eligible for and or receive a cannabis permit if that person or entity or any director or officer of that entity or a person who owned any portion of that entity's shares, engaged or engages in, present tense, unpermitted and or illegal cannabis activity involving so on and so forth. This might be a Mr. Preziosi question. So is this to say that if any person who is listed as an investor on the permit is found to be engaging in illegal activities as described here, that they may be subject to a revocation of their cannabis business permit? That's my question. If we still have Mr. Preziosi. And I can circle back to it if staff want to just follow up with him real quick to see how he's doing.
Chair
Okay.
Errol,
Yeah.
sorry, my video was, my microphone was muted, I
We
apologize.
thought we lost you in that nice landscape that you're in currently. So
Tempting, I know, but to your question, I was re-reviewing the section. So this subsection D, it's 490, denial and revocation. This really speaks to subsection D speaks to ineligibility. So this is not focused so much on revocation, but it's the ineligibility to receive a cannabis business permit to begin with. So any person listed under subsection D would be considered ineligible to receive a cannabis business permit in the first place.
okay, and I guess maybe I'm kind of looking just above that now, 9-490, denial and revocation. I'm just wondering what the process is if there are any retail cannabis investors who are listed as primary investors or owners or have a large ownership stake. If they are subsequently found to be conducting cannabis business illegally, theoretically, would they be subject to a revocation of their CBP in Costa Mesa if there was illegal activity outside the city? If it was found?
Then, potentially.
Okay. But I just don't know if it's written here or not.
They would be ineligible to hold that permit.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Preziosi. Moving along, page 9 of the same attachment, under F, insurance, it says, we're kind of in the middle, third line from the bottom, $1 million aggregate for personal injury liability, so on and so forth. But then if we turn to page 13 of the same attachment, or I'm sorry, if we turn to page 13 of this following attachment, it says $2 million insurance. So I don't know if there was a change here, or if I'm tracking with it, Ms. Halligan.
Chairman Ayers, those are the $2 million is specific to retail storefront operations.
Okay.
That doesn't apply to all cannabis businesses in Costa Mesa.
Okay. All right. Thank you. If we turn to page 10 and we look at section G, miscellaneous operating requirements, and we go down to number 5, it says, there shall not be a physician located in or around any cannabis business at any time for the purpose of evaluating patients for the issuance of a cannabis prescription or card. And I was kind of curious to know why. I mean, if the person is a licensed physician, would we go so far as to say that they cannot conduct regular medical business, even if it's next door to a cannabis retailer?
That provision, Chair, is written to, I don't know if the best term of, I could give it an example, but for lack of a better word, I won't even go there. So it really is to prevent the issuance of certain cards through a process that's really not medically backed or supported. I mean, where there would be a medical person on site that could issue things that for that specific use. It was just deemed as something that wasn't something that was favorable. Yeah, especially for youth. One of the issues that is still involved with cannabis operations is allowing use under 21, as you might recall when we were reviewing projects, when they had a special medical card. And this would be basically preventative and more specific to that age group, to where they would have to actually go to a medical doctor off-site that wasn't engaged in encouraging the distribution of cards for some economic benefits.
Okay. Thank you, Director Dropkin. I appreciate that. Moving along, page 11. If we go to number 11 on page 11, under loitering, it says the owner and or operator of a cannabis business shall prohibit loitering by persons outside the facility, both on the premises and within 50 feet of the premises. If we go to the next page and we look at number 2, it says, do not loiter, linger, or otherwise congregate within 50 feet of the entrance to the premises. So I don't know if we wanted to rectify that language difference between the two. Do we want it from the entrance, or do we want it from premises? Or it doesn't really matter, or am I just being difficult?
Chair, if we could look into that and see if it needs to be put together.
Okay, I'm just trying to polish this up a little bit. That's all.
No problem. We appreciate that.
Sure. Just below that, on page 12, number 4, it says hours of operation shall be limited to 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. I didn't know if we wanted to put in unless otherwise stated, because I know that some operators are either legally obligated to not be open past a certain point. I don't know if we have it to open on the early side, that they can't open early, but I know that we have some that can't open too late. So I don't know if this even applies to the existing ones that we've already heard.
So Chair Arith, this is for retail storefronts only. And in retail storefronts, we've only limited, further reduced the hours. So a potential change would be unless otherwise limited by conditions of approval?
Yeah.
Something to that effect?
Exactly.
Okay. That would be something that I believe we could work with the city attorney's office to prepare in advance of city council.
Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that we weren't giving a blanket statement to some of the businesses that we've already restricted on hours of operation, if that makes sense. Okay. If we turn the page to page 13. I guess nothing on there. And let me look at this. I don't think I have many comments past this point. Thank you for indulging me and letting me ask all these questions, colleagues. I appreciate it, and thank you, staff. All right, I think that's about it for my questions for the moment. Commissioner Vivar.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else. I just, staff, again, thanks for bearing with us. And I'm honestly just blown away by your work on this. It's been a long time coming, and bringing this to Planning Commission. And so thank you for your providing all those documents to us, especially the red lines, I think really help. And I think any members of the public as well, and council who review this, that is definitely helpful as well to see the track changes of the policy language. So thank you for that.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Vivar. Anyone else before we move along? Good? Okay. If we have buyer's remorse, we can always revisit this. Okay. Now open the public hearing. If you would like to speak to this item, please approach the podium. I don't see anyone in chambers, so if you're on Zoom, please use the raised hand option, or if you're joining the meeting on your phone and would like to speak, please press *9 and we'll let you into the room. So Anna, let's go ahead and start with Zoom.
Janet L., you may provide your public comment.
Ms. Janet, the floor is yours.
Janet L., you may provide your public comment.
We can come back to Janet if she's having some technical difficulties.
Yeah, raise hand feature in case you're having trouble.
Candace Hawes, you may provide your public comment.
Ms. Hawes?
Hi there. My name is Candace Hawes, and I'm the founder and executive director of Orange County Normal. I just wanted to say that I just feel really badly for the small business owners and the folks that have been invested in this process for many years and invested a lot of money in the process, that have probably been sitting on these properties for many years and been waiting in line. I was part of the ad hoc committee many years ago, and I expressed my concern with setting up this process with no cap in it, and that people, could put a lot of money into this, and that, leaving the process, with no limit, that potentially they could see 50, 60 applications, and that would be more than the city could handle, and that we could see a potential problem like this. And then now we're in this situation, and there's a potential for a lot of people to lose money. So I'm really sad to see that we've gone down this road, and that there could be a potential for lawsuits and for people losing money. So really sad to see that we couldn't have resolved the situation earlier, and that hopefully other cities won't go down this road, and that we won't have unlimited number of licenses in the future, and that hopefully we can figure out something else. So again, thank you for all your work on this. And I hope that we can maybe set up a meeting and try to work out some other kind of solution. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Ms. Hawes.
Janet L., you may provide your public comment.
Ms. Janet L.
Hi, everyone. Sorry about that, first time. My name is Janet Loftus, and I'm speaking for myself and my husband, Sean.
Hello.
Although our preference would be no cannabis dispensaries in Costa Mesa, we are happy to see that some progress is being made toward reasonable guidelines. We've read through the revisions to the code and do not agree with allowing a maximum of 30 conditional use permits. Although this is clearly an improvement from an unlimited number, it is still far too high a number considering the population of Costa Mesa. I know you've all heard these numbers before, but compared with other cities, San Diego has one dispensary for every 39,000 people, Los Angeles, one for 16,000, Long Beach, one for 11,600, Santa Ana, one for 11,000, and Vista, one for 10,000. At 30 dispensaries, Costa Mesa will have one dispensary for every 3,650 people, close to 3 times the number of the most saturated city, and that's just comparing us to the worst case. If, according to the proposed revisions, the goal is for 15 dispensaries, then why allow 30 permits when we know that this is not in the best interest of our city? And it's highly likely that 30 permits now will mean 30 permits for the foreseeable future, as even failing businesses will find a way to work the system and make sure the cannabis permit remains in operation. So we ask that you stop issuing any further CUPs for cannabis storefronts, which would leave us at a current max of 22 and work down to 15 from there. Some will say that this isn't fair to the businesses that have been through this submittal process for the last few years, and that may be true. But what really isn't fair is the way that the public was completely left out of the process when the regulations were created in 2021. The ad hoc committee that was created to help develop the regulations did a really thorough job of reaching out to the cannabis industry about what they wanted, with zero outreach to the residents of Costa Mesa. Now we are being asked to live with the mess that was created because a few of our leaders had a vision of Costa Mesa as a cannabis mecca with an unlimited number of dispensaries and pushed through a poorly thought out set of regulations. Also, we would like to see health warnings posted at every store, a recommendation by Councilmember Reynolds, and a portion of the cannabis taxes allocated toward marijuana prevention and education programs at every middle school and high school in the Newport Mesa Unified School District. Unfortunately, the majority of the public is not aware of some of the severe health consequences of using the high THC products that these dispensaries carry. According to Dr. Lev at Scripps Hospital, San Diego emergency rooms are now seeing 37 cannabis-related diagnoses a day, the most common being psychosis. Colorado has had a 24% increase in emergency room psychosis cases in the 5 years following legalization. This may not be the easiest way to move forward, but today's decisions have very far-reaching implications and is worth dealing with some messiness now for the future of our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Loftus. Appreciate your comment. Thank you. Next speaker.
There is no one else.
All right. No one on telephone?
2 people just raised their hand. Just one moment.
Okay, yeah.
Priscilla, you may provide your public comment.
Priscilla.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Sure can. Welcome.
All right. In June 2022, I sent you letters, articles, and studies regarding the unplanned and haphazard way the city was bringing in 60 cannabis shops. The promised influx of money blinded you and the city council to the problems and lawsuits I warned of. Now the effects of your decisions have come home to roost. First of all, 60 cannabis shops is too many in a city this size. 2 in each district seems more reasonable, because the argument equating cannabis shops with neighborhood liquor stores is totally false. Liquor stores are convenience stores in the main, selling a wide range of food, snacks, and sundries needed by families. Most people buying wine and spirits do not intend to get drunk, where cannabis shops basically sell only one item. It is used for medicinal and recreational purposes, but it is harder to determine the effects, especially with edibles. Driving or doing any other dangerous task under the influence of edibles is unpredictable. Therefore, DUIs should be differentiated by law enforcement by intoxicants to determine if these shops are affecting impaired drivers, accidents, and deaths. Second, the argument that cannabis shops will revive derelict neighborhoods is a lie. Studies have shown all these shops only cause property values to plummet and bring crime to communities. City officials ignored this information because these shops will not affect their children and their property values. Cannabis will end up in poor neighborhoods. This in itself is a despicable plan to line the city's coffers. Also, rows and rows of the cannabis shops in poor areas is terrible. Finally, the separation requirements for cannabis shops does not protect our children or neighborhoods. Staff recommends 1,000 feet should separate shops from youth centers. I don't think they should be allowed where children pass on their way to school, the park, or youth centers. And I think most parents would agree. Accordingly, I think keeping cannabis shops 1,000 feet from children's bedrooms or front lawns is more appropriate. The signage the staff recommends is also more appropriate. You have an opportunity to do it right this time. Please put the health and well-being of Costa Mesa residents over that of the out-of-town corporations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rocco. Appreciate it.
Alexander Haberbush, you may provide your public comment.
Mr. Haberbush, welcome.
Thank you. Yes, I'm an attorney representing homeowners and business owners in the east side of Costa Mesa, and today I'd like to address the matter that's currently before this Planning Commission. The essence of this issue lies not in the existence of cannabis businesses within our city, but in their excessive concentration. Such overconcentration poses substantial risks to the character, safety, and economic stability of our neighborhoods. It diminishes the quality of life for our residents, and it undermines the viability of diverse local businesses. Now, I'd like to acknowledge the city's efforts to regulate this emerging industry. However, the current trajectory suggests a potential for saturation far exceeding what is reasonable or beneficial for the community. With a significant number of applicants pending, the question looms, how many cannabis businesses will this city permit before it adversely affects our community? Today, we have seen one proposal for that, a limit of 30 cannabis retailers. However, I suggest that this limit is still far too high. Instead, I urge this council to consider the immediate measures consisting of the following: implement buffer zones between cannabis shops to prevent clustering, thereby preserving the integrity of residential and commercial areas. Establish a firm cap well below the 30 limit that's currently being contemplated, ensuring a balanced approach that respects both the economic potential of these businesses and the well-being of the community, and have rigorous vetting of applications. Encourage the Planning Commission to critically assess future applications, particularly with regard to the potential impact on neighborhood compatibility, public health, and safety. Community's response has been swift and clear. There is still currently an online petition entitled "Stop the Oversaturation of Cannabis Shops on Eastside Costa Mesa," and it has been gathering significant support. This initiative, alongside our Facebook group, Too Many Pot Shops on Eastside Costa Mesa, demonstrates that this concern is one that animates residents. This is not merely a regulatory issue, but a pivotal moment for the future of this city. The decisions made today will shape the fabric of the community for years to come. As such, they require careful, considerate, and community-focused deliberation. I therefore call upon this Planning Commission to take decisive action that reflects the concerns and interests of the residents of Costa Mesa. It's imperative that we act now to prevent overconcentration of cannabis shops and preserve the unique character and quality of life in our neighborhoods. Thank you for your attention on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Haberbush.
There is no one else.
All right, thank you, Anna. Go ahead and close the public comment portion of the public hearing and ask commissioners if you have any further questions for staff. Commissioner Andrade? Commissioner Rojas? Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, again, just for a point of clarity, well, two things. If in the, I can't recall if in those other recommendations that we had outlined in that separate slide, if we have included kind of the health warning piece that some constituents and I think council members have shared. Is that, and if not, if that could be something we can include in that list, since it's again kind of bubbled up a couple of times.
What do we have in the signage section of the change? That wasn't there the 18-inch by 11-inch? Wasn't there some kind of warning on there?
Let's see, Chair Arith, the notice would just be indicating that smoking, ingesting, or otherwise consuming cannabis is prohibited on the property, allowing the word cannabis to be used 2 times at a specific site, but it was not a health warning.
Okay. Mr. Zick.
I think the suggestion by Commissioner Andrade is something that should, her interest in that should probably be reflected in the record. I think it's a bit problematic because from what I've seen, and I'm far from anything even remotely close to an expert on this, you have medical professionals saying it's helpful and beneficial for certain conditions. Clearly misuse has adverse effects, as the public speaker indicated. I think we would be hard pressed as a city to come up with something that we would have our logo on that speaks to health risks. And again, for most people, we're talking about over the age of 21. These are consenting adults. If anyone should be putting health warnings in this area, it should be the manufacturers of products, not us. That's just my personal opinion.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Zick and Commissioner Andrade. If I may, I'll just say, I don't think this was a specific ask from City Council. Maybe we could have it reflect in the record. If there's already some signal that they plan on talking about it, then I'm sure they're probably going to bring it up when the time comes. So maybe we leave it to council to settle this one. Is that okay? Absolutely. Okay. All right. So with that, I'll go ahead and make a motion to find that the project is categorically exempt from the environmental review under the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, pursuant to CEQA guidelines. Section 15061B3 general rule and the updates to the city's retail cannabis provisions will not have a significant impact on the environment. And recommend that City Council give first reading to ordinances approving Code Amendment number 2024XX, amending portions of the Costa Mesa Municipal Code Title 13, Planning, Zoning, and Development, and Code Amendment number 2024XX, amending portions of Title 9, Licenses and Business Regulations, both pertaining to retail cannabis storefront regulations. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Rojas. I'll go ahead and say that if there's any one of us up here that feels like this could be improved further, or that there's something that we wish there was more or less of in here, and we all feel that way, then I think we've pretty much done our job. Because this does not reflect all of the things that I want, and I suspect that it doesn't reflect everything that you want either. What it does signal, however, is kind of like what we've sent to City Council recently under other circumstances like inclusionary housing, was the intention is to get it back to them after deep contemplation. We did our job. We argued this vehemently and very strongly and passionately. So I think sending it to them as written with the minutes that they'll read as far as the additional things that we think that they should consider, that they'll be reading that, they'll be listening to that, and they will be making judgments based off of really good information because we debated it. So I think in that sense, I'm very proud of the work that we've done. And that's my motion. Commissioner Rojas, would you like to speak to this?
Yeah, I agree with what you said there, and I also know that the City Council is listening, and I appreciate the citizens that called in and made their comments because a lot of good points were made there. They spoke for us. There was now, there's 5 of us here present, but with them, they're the 6th man on the totem pole, I believe, and I appreciate their feedback and hope that the City Council, I know they will, take into account all the comments and views that were presented tonight.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Rojas. Commissioner Vivar?
Yeah, I want to echo your sentiments. I was thinking about that earlier today as well, that I think all of us up here saw things go into this that we thought were most important to the proposed changes, and other things that some of us thought were important didn't make it on. But I think the fact that we engaged with this item by item, and I think, Chair, you did a great job of taking those apart and making sure that we went through an itemized list rather than trying to mush everything into a single package and voting on that, because that wouldn't have gotten anywhere. So I think the fact that we spent a lot of time on this and spent 2 meetings, in fact, discussing these items, I think shows our dedication to detail and to considering all of the ramifications of these potential changes. And I think that this is a great piece of policy change recommendation that we send to City Council. And I'm glad that we were able to participate in this, and glad that we also had significant public participation in this. And I would urge anybody online listening to this, or will listen to this later, who finds this to be an interesting topic, to follow this to City Council, where it will be going next, as they have the final say. So that's it for me, Mr. Chairman, and I will be supporting the motion.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Vivar. Commissioner Sick.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the motion, and I've got some comments. First of all, I very much appreciate the call from the public. I think all of us greatly appreciate public engagement. I think we wish we had more of it. Personally, I wish we'd had a whole lot more before this thing ever even got on the ballot. And at least had a whole lot more when the ordinance was being put together. But we didn't. We're here now. I went back and watched our meeting from March of 2021. I was the only planning commissioner currently who was involved in that meeting. Boy, we must have been really smart back then collectively, but I don't think so. I don't think we were that prescient. I just think we had a lot of input that for the most part was considered, maybe, certainly not implemented. The whole discussion about what is a youth center and this narrow definition that excludes karate centers, et cetera, all that discussion occurred 3 years ago. We're having it again tonight. It's too bad. Separation between cannabis retail businesses. That was actually part of the motion from the Planning Commission that was approved 3 years ago. Doesn't mean we were right. But these things did not come up accidentally and, oh, by the way, we learned as we went. No, these were things that were consciously considered and discussed and recommended 3 years ago. I'm happy we're doing it now. I'm sad we didn't do it then. Doing it now, though, is better than never. However, we have 22 approved cannabis businesses, none of which fall under these new guidelines. The 6 or 7 or 8 that we're about to consider over the next several months, none of them will fall subject to these new restrictions. That's really unfortunate. When this thing was first pushed, this Measure Q, it was pushed because there was this feeling that coming out of COVID, there were budgetary challenges, and this was a way to bring additional tax revenue into the city. I'm not making this up. This was part of the pitch. $3 million, up to $3 million of tax revenue. That was a gross number. Subtract out expenses, and it would be a lower number. Of course, if we're getting more than $3 million in gross tax revenue, then it might be higher than that. But that's what was pushed. And what have we given up to get $3 million of tax revenue in a city that has a budget of well over $100 million a year? What have we given up for that? Are we chasing the dollars and giving up? Look at all the residents that are complaining about all these issues, businesses that are complaining about all these issues. And what are we getting out of it? I'm glad we're doing this now. Glad we're doing this now. 30 is too many. We all said that. That's why our recommendation is for a cap of 15. Well, why don't we have 15 right now as a cap? Oh, we have 22 that's already approved. And it would not be fair to those that are very close to the finish line getting a hearing. Wouldn't be fair to them. What the city did do to try to be fair to people that are nowhere near the finish line is to say, if you want to withdraw your application, you can. We'll refund your fees. That isn't something the city normally does. So I think the city has gone out of its way to be business friendly in that regard. How long will it take us to get from 30 to 15? I don't know. The suggestion by Priscilla that we have 2 per district, that would come out to 12. Our cap is 15. I'd say, Priscilla, we're probably on the same page. Our number, pretty darn close to what your number is, assuming we can get there. And to Mr. Haberbush, I've heard him speak many times. I don't disagree with anything he said. Of course, I wish all of that was said by him and by all the residents back when this was on the ballot. I wish it was said by him and all the residents back when the ordinance was being crafted. But here we are. Character, safety, economic. You know, I've been by those 3 locations that you're concerned about that have been, I guess 2 have been approved, the 3rd wasn't, a 4th is on its way. There's a homelessness problem in that area, and it has nothing to do with the cannabis businesses. So when you're concerned about the character and the safety, I resonate with that, I agree with you. But it's not associated with the cannabis businesses that have been approved for that location, or the 3rd, which was recently denied, or the 4th, which is coming along in another couple of months probably. So I agree with you. I don't know that I would attribute it to the cannabis businesses. But again, the people voted for it and they're getting it. We're trying to fix the problems. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Zick. Commissioner Andrade.
Yeah, a lot of discussion, review went into this, so I'm looking forward for this to now go with our council to make their final determinations and hopefully make this effective as soon as possible and as we progress in this effort. So I will, because this is a concerted effort and there's still more discussion to be had on the topic, but I do agree in the recommendations for in the cap that it should be less than 30. I mean, it's very concerning to me to imagine Costa Mesa with 30 operational storefronts in our community. That's all.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Andrade. All right, I think that's it. Let's call the question.
That motion carries 5-0.
All right, thank you, Anna. That decision is final unless appealed to the City Council within 7 days. And I will note, when's the last time we voted unanimously for cannabis? Anything?
Long time.
Very long time. So good job, team. This was a good one. I appreciate all the work that you put into this. All right. So that brings us to old business, new business, and I see neither. So we'll move on to departmental reports, starting with Mr. Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no reports from the Public Works Department, but I'd just like to say a few words to Director Lee. I know this is her last Planning Commission meeting, so I just want to thank her for all her grace and for all the times that she's tolerated me here. I know I've shown my ignorance from time to time, but nonetheless, you've shown a lot of grace towards me. So I know I don't consider this as a farewell. I know it's a small world that our paths will cross one day. So thank you, Jennifer, and we wish you all the very best. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yang. If you don't mind, Mr. Preziosi, let's go to you next for City Attorney report.
Thank you, Chair Earth. I do not have a substantive City Attorney report on legal matters, but I would like to wish Ms. Lee a very fond farewell, knowing that we'll see each other again soon, I'm sure. It's been a pleasure working with her, and she has been a genuine attribute to the city.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Preziosi. And I think all things being considered about Director Lee, how about the commission goes and we'll give Director Lee the final say in the departmental report at the end of this meeting. Does that sound okay? All right. So if anyone would like to jump in and say a few words to Ms. Lee.
I would, first of all, obviously, thank you very much, Director Lee, for your help. And I think it's a testament to your skill set that the city had to hire 2 rock stars to take the spot of what you're able to do, but that speaks volumes to the staff that are coming in as well as your work. So thank you very much for your time here.
Thank you. Commissioner Zick?
I remember working with Jennifer when she first began assisting Barry Curtis. And as much as I liked Barry, and as much as I respected his professionalism, he was incredible. He was quality. I kept thinking, I wonder when we're going to get to work with just Jennifer. And so when Barry retired and Jennifer was promoted, I knew it was much more than just filling a gap. This was somebody who deserved that position and deserved it for a long time. Quite frankly, I had thought that one day I'd see you as our city manager. I have no idea what your aspirations were or are, because I never talked to you about your career. But clearly, the decision you've made is one that you no doubt are excited about. I once had a boss who said, you know, when a person leaves, you miss them for a day and you don't miss them after that, meaning that nobody's irreplaceable. He's wrong. The one thing he's right about is that people will forget the value that you bring to the city. We'll ask questions, and the answer we're going to hear is, well, that was before my time. That's what we're going to hear. We're going to ask, well, how did this come about? Don't know the history on how that came about. We're going to hear that a lot. We didn't hear that much from you. You will be missed because of that. You will also be missed because of your unbelievably friendly, knowledgeable, complete, professional. I mean, whatever expletives I could look up in the dictionary, they really apply to you in how you've worked in this city. You listen, you're responsive, you're analytical. I mean, the Irvine Company, wow, have they gotten lucky in getting you to join their team. And it's a big loss to us. I don't know what we could have done to make you more happy so that you wouldn't do that. If you needed somebody to drive you to and from home, I might have volunteered a couple days a week. Whatever it was, you've been an asset, and you will be sorely missed. I will miss you.
We'll keep going. I don't know if we're still streaming.
Well, yeah, just wanted to say thank you so much for your time being here. As a new oncoming commissioner, you were uber helpful in guidance and support and just referencing and some of the historical decisions that were made and that we had to deal with as a new commissioner. So thank you so much for your support, your guidance, and for an amazing leadership, because we always have very informative and well put together presentations. So you clearly are leaving an excellent high performance team, and that would only happen under great leadership. So thank you.
So before I pass it on to Commissioner Barr, is it lost on anybody that the city's falling apart as you're on your way out, Jennifer? Commissioner Barr.
Yeah, I want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues up here. I've been on the commission, as people might know, for almost 2.5 years. And from the moment I joined, I was impressed by Ms. Lee's knowledge. You just seem to always have an answer to anything we threw at you, which was impressive because you know that some of us up here can pretty much fire questions upon questions right after another that are hard. But I think you really think on your feet, or every time we're able to give just very wise and informed answers to our questions. And yeah, just thank you for everything you've done for our city. I know you've seen a lot in your time here. And for example, it's interesting that close to the beginning of my time as commissioner, we started the cannabis discussions, and now we're basically at the threshold of leaving those behind us. And I know you've been through it all thick and thin. That the housing element, the inclusionary housing discussions, a lot of these very oftentimes emotionally charged discussions. And not only have you put up with us, but also with 7 other people that sit on the dais on Tuesdays. So I just wanted to, really thank you for all of that. I've seen you just, just kill it really with your participation in these meetings, and I think you definitely leave big shoes to fill, and in fact, so big that we need a person each to fill each of those shoes. And as someone who works in city service, I know that in the time you've been here, you have dedicated your life, your talents, and your energy to the very honorable task of serving the public good, the common good, and serving the community. And I know that in your time here, the city of Costa Mesa has become a better place, and so we will definitely have that legacy of yours as you move on. And I'm sure that people in the future will be telling about Jennifer Lee's legacy as well. So you will be missed, but your impact will be felt in the city for generations to come. And thank you for your dedication to our city, for all the planning work that you've done here, for the future of this city, and for as well just your contribution as a person, as a professional. And I'll certainly miss you, and I hope we can stay in touch after your departure. And I'm sure that in the not too distant future, our paths will cross again. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Director Lee, Jennifer, Jen. I know that recently there was an expression that came up here in the department that we say findings, not feelings, right? And I think it's a good one for the vast majority of the work that we do, especially when we're making land use decisions. But at this point, however rare those times are, it's good to let some of that feeling out. I share in the sentiments of all of my colleagues here, and even the ones that aren't here tonight, who do send their deepest regards and respect to you, in saying that you really have left a considerable impression on this city. And it's my regret that this city isn't big enough to absorb all of the talent that you have. If anyone hadn't said it before, it almost seems like, it's not just ambition with you, Jen. It's that you really are so talented at what you do. You have a real knack for your profession that you've never reached your peak. So, why, I don't know, in a sense, why would we keep you all to ourselves when you have so much more to give to this world? And we wouldn't just want to contain you, so to speak. And I know that you're going to do such great things as you move on to the Irvine Company and perhaps beyond, Maybe you'll even run for president one day. I'm sure all of us would vote for you. So, I'll say in a different vein, I took note of city council, several members saying, they were trying to think of a word about you, right? I think graceful was the one that they used. I thought, Jennifer Lee, definitely graceful, exhibits grace in everything she does. But I thought rock star was a better word, like an 80s rock ballad. I don't know how else to put it, because I don't explore feelings very often. I'm into findings. So, but if I had to explain it a little further, there have been several moments up here for however period of time we've been up here, whether it's been for less than a year or 6, 7 years in some instances, to where the conversations get spicy, where sometimes we can lock horns and maybe the way that we're interpreting certain aspects of the general plan aren't the way that staff maybe is looking at the general plan. But I could tell you of all the people that I've had to, lock horns with, if you will, about interpreting certain things or fact finding, I always thought you were the most worthy adversary if I ever had to draw my line in the sand, because I always felt more often, and yeah, pretty much all the time, that after talking with you, Jen, I would go, man, she's right, damn. and then I would have to think much more deeply, much more critically, much more, not even abstractly, but just more holistically into the arguments that I was making, because you were such a knowledgeable person in anything that you talked about related to this, and I'm sure many other things too. The result of which is, after so many times of engaging like that and really arguing the nuance of things, I felt like I've become a better planning commissioner. I feel like I've become a better colleague to my colleagues that are up here, that the level of reverence and respect, if you will, has become even deeper and more meaningful because of you. And all of us are going to move on one day. It just so happens that today is your day. None of us are going to be up here forever. But I think over a period of time, like the time that you've put into this city, you leave impressions on people, and that those people take that impression with them, and they leave an impression on the other people and the institutions in which they take part. So even as you leave, you're leaving us all with your grace or your rock starism, if you will. And we're going to be carrying that on. And ideally, when it's our time to step down or retire or however it works, the people who come after us are going to carry that sentiment with them. And you'll be a part of that too, Jen. So even though Costa Mesa might not be your work home anymore, I really do hope that you know that you've left an impression on this city that's going to last long after you're gone. I really admire how you engage with staff. I hope you know that your employees that will see that and feel that kind of power that you exhibit, and it'll go down through the generations as well. I have no doubt about that. So I don't want to overtalk it. I think I've been talking for a while now, but I wish you the best, Jen. I can't wait. I don't think you'll ever reach your peak, but I wish you the best in wherever you go. You've been great, wonderful to work with. So if you don't mind, maybe you can, if you want to say a few words for the departmental report, you're welcome to, and then maybe we could give you the flowers here and maybe take a picture up front if that's okay. Is that okay? So Director Lee, departmental report.
Thank you so much, Chair. I have no formal departmental report. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to make a few comments. I've worked for Costa Mesa now for 6.5 years. I can say it's been the most amazing experience that I've had in my career. You don't get opportunities to work in a community like Costa Mesa very often, and I'm so glad that I was able to be here and contribute. I want to just thank you for your kind comments. I've really appreciated working with this commission. I always appreciate how planning commissioners give so much of their time and themselves and really engage and care about the community, and this commission really does that, and I appreciate that so much. The last thing I want to say is just that I'm so grateful for our leadership here in the city, and my department staff in particular Scott Drapkin, who's been an amazing partner in managing our development services department. And our staff team in general are just so intelligent and passionate and dedicated, and they bring that every time to the commission. and I appreciate that too. So I just want to say thank you, and I'm grateful, and this won't be the last time we see each other. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So I guess before we adjourn, we could maybe if you could meet us up front, Jen, and we'll present you with some of these flowers and we'll take a quick picture. Is that okay? All right, thanks, gang. All right. So for the public who's still on with us, sorry we had a little bit of a power outage earlier, but I will say that during that time, Commissioner Vivar gave some very, very nice words. I think all of us in chambers will remember, but sorry you didn't get to hear it yourself. But that does bring us to adjourning the meeting and sending Jennifer Lee off formally at this point. So we'll now adjourn the meeting. Thanks for joining us.